Noah, welcome.
Hello,
Noah,
thank
how
you.
are you?
Good, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
All right,
So,
welcome back, everyone. My name's Aaron Hunter. I'm a senior technical trainer with AWS Training Certification. Today, we're going to talk about Amazon Linux 2023 with our friend Noah, and I'm joined with my good friend Steve.
yeah, I'm Steve. Still the same developer advocate for .NET PowerShell from 5 minutes ago. So, Noah, before we
Right.
get started, please introduce yourself to our audience. Tell them a little bit about what you do at AWS.
Sure. So yeah, my name's Noah. I've been an engineer at AWS for quite a while now. Most recently, it's been focused on building Amazon Linux and building Amazon Linux 2023. In the past, I've worked on some of our other services like ECS and Fargate. And in the really, really distant past, I worked on a lot of the underlying infrastructure that EC2 is built on top of. So there's there's a lot of I've had my fingers in a lot of different places inside of compute in AWS.
Cool.
Yeah, that's
Before we
really
get
cool.
started with you, one thing I forgot to mention, we forgot to mention earlier on, is we love to hear where you're joining us from on the show. So please put that in the chat. Who knows, we may even flag you up if you're a distant country. The other thing is that at the end of today's show, there's going to be a survey. Please fill it out. The first 50 respondents get a $10 AWS usage credit. So worth having a go at that. So back to Noah. So Amazon Linux 2023 is now generally available.
That's right. It went GA on March 15th, and yeah, we're really excited to get it into people's hands and get people starting to use it.
So I'm going to go dive right in. What's special about AL 2023?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let me sort of introduce a little bit of what it is and sort of why we built it. So Amazon Linux is Amazon's in-house Linux distribution, and AL 2023 is the third generation of our Linux distribution. It's a cloud-oriented distribution. It powers Amazon and it powers a lot of our external customers as well. And what we try to do is make sure that it provides the best experience that you're going to get on in EC2 and integrating with AWS services. The first thing you'll really notice with AL 2023 that's kind of the most obvious improvement is fresh software. The core software of our older distributions, AL2, starting to show its age. And so everything is really refreshed in AL 2023. So you get, all the new software, new core components like Linux kernel, OpenSSL, libc, all of these things are refreshed. The sort of user environment is new and fresh, and it's it's a much more modern distribution. It doesn't System D is integrated more deeply into the distribution and how the system boots and operates, and so there's a lot of new stuff there.
Wow, that seems like a complete, almost top to bottom refresh.
It
looks pretty nice, for
largely
sure.
is, yeah. It largely is a real like complete refresh. And one of the things that's really different about what we did with AL 2023 is that in the past, we've been a you know we've tried to really stick very close to an upstream distribution. In the past, it was a version of CentOS or something along those lines, and in AL 2023 we departed from that and decided that we wanted to move to something that gives us that allows us to have a faster and more predictable release cadence. And so this predictability was one of the uh, real changes that we wanted to emphasize with AL 2023. So an important thing to think about here is that it's not just AL 2023 that we are sort of talking about now. It's what comes next, and part of that predictability that we want to get at is, we've already said that 2 years from now, we're going to release AL 2025. And then 2 years after that is AL 2027. And so we've got this predictable release cadence for major releases. And then within the lifetime of one of those releases, AL 2023, for example, we will have a quarterly release cadence where we might refresh some of the components of the distribution to keep it from getting stale, and to keep some of the language runtimes and things like that up to date, and introduce new ones. So right now we ship with PHP 8.1. In a future quarterly release, we may update that to PHP 8.2 or something along those lines. We may include new versions of Python in these quarterly releases, and that sort of stuff. And the idea is that it's all very, very predictable. So as a customer, that we're going to have a quarterly release and we're going to pull some software in. That 2 years from now, when we release AL 2025, we'll still support 2023 for another 3 years in maintenance mode. But at that point, 25 will be the new thing that you want to start migrating to.
That sounds really cool. Like you mentioned a lot about these different packages and updates that might happen quarterly. Let's say if I need to know about that ahead of time or when it happens, can I go somewhere to find more information about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information that we're publishing. We publish release notes sort of as we release things. We've also got a GitHub page where you can engage with us directly, and if there is software that you need, or if you do need to make requests for changes that we can make, or if we need to engage with you to get feedback on how we're doing, or if there's something that you need from us, we can do that. And so that's a great way for us to keep in touch with our customers.
So that sounds really, really interesting, that people can ask for software to be included in these bundles. I mean, what's it? You mentioned PHP earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, generally, what bundles are actually in there? I think you mentioned OpenSSL as well.
Sure.
But generally, what can people expect, say, from the distribution today?
Yeah, so I mean, we ship a lot of the popular language runtimes. We have .NET. We have yeah. I thought that might make you happy. We have Ruby 3.2. We have Python 3.11. We have Rust and Go, and all of the standard C compilers. LLVM and Clang, and we have GCC. So we have all of that, and we have the ability to introduce new versions. We're sort of namespacing these, so you can install Python 3.11, and that is a specific Python 3.11 package. And in the future, when we decide, when Python 3.15 or something is out at some point in the future, that might be available as well, and you'll be able to then work on migrating to the newer version of Python.
Cool.
And different versions of Python, obviously, software developers, they know how to troubleshoot and hopefully roll out new patches and so forth. But what are some of the tips that you can share with our users in terms of adopting and embracing AL23?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things, you'll definitely want to spend time porting your software to it, right? It's definitely not intended to be a drop-in replacement for AL2. Really the thing to do is sort of get started early, get started in a development environment, and see if your software works, see what's missing. If there are things that are missing, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things that we've enabled with AL 2023 is SELinux, which is for people who aren't familiar with it, it's a mandatory access control system. It's part of the Linux kernel for 20 years or something like that. We've always had it available in Amazon Linux, but we've enabled it by default in AL 2023. It does run in permissive mode, which means that it's not going to stop your application from working, but it is, if it does find policy violations or anything like that, it's going to log them. So that is something that'll really help you with this porting process as you are trying to get your software to run. Keep an eye on the audit log. If your software isn't generating any sort of errors in that log, then consider switching the your instances to enforcing mode, which gives you a pretty significant extra layer of application security and isolation and we've made that really easy in AL 2023. So that's
Sounds
something
really
to
easy.
really
Yeah.
look at. Yeah, it's something to look at when when you're thinking about porting your applications to AL 2023.
Can you maybe show us how to do that?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a demo where we can do that. I want to show, there are a couple of things I want to show here in my demo. First, I'm just going to show real quick, sort of how it is, here's how you'd find AL 2023. So this is the standard EC2 web console. And if you just go to launch an instance, and it's going to bring up this wizard, and you'll find that AL 2023 is it's going to be presented fairly prominently here. It's the default version of Amazon Linux now, so you're going to see that it's the first thing in this list here. And another thing I really quickly want to point out is we've got you'll notice, and I don't know how visible this is in the stream here, but it's okay if it's not. There's a sort of a version number here in this date string in the description
I
of
see
this.
it. Yeah.
And we're going to kind of come back to that because there's this really cool feature that we talk about in AL 2023 that we introduced. It's called deterministic upgrades through versioned repositories, and this version is the version of the repository that this particular Amazon Linux AMI uses here. So I'm going to show that. I'm going to show the SELinux thing real quick. So here I've got a list of our AL 2023 AMIs. The GA AMI, the first one that we released for general availability, is this one with the 315 and its date. That's the date that we launched it. That's the version of the repositories it uses. And then we've got another one that we just released. That's the 322. That included a few sort of bug fixes that didn't quite make it into the GA release. So
Okay.
I've gone ahead and launched a couple of these. So I'm going to show I'll show a little bit about how that works. So we're going to first switch over to one. This is the GA AMI, and we're going to log into it. And the first thing that we're going to see is this banner that tells us that there's a newer version available to us. So you remember this was the one that was launched with the 315 and its string, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it knows already that there's a new one that 322 is available, and it gives us a command that we can run, and it'll tell us a little bit about what's available and how we might install it. And so we can go ahead and before I run this upgrade command that it suggested, if we just do a regular DNF upgrade. DNF is the package manager, by the way. For people that use Yum on AL2, DNF is its replacement. It's just a rewrite of it. Works essentially the same. But you notice that DNF upgrade said that there aren't any new packages available, but it did show that same banner again. And if we then DNF upgrade with that,
a reference to that package.
With a reference to that versioned repository, then it'll tell us that there's a bunch of new updates available for us, and we can go ahead and install them. And what that's going to do is it's going to actually bring that instance up to the state of AL 2023 in the new version. So it's going to bring it. So we started from this 315 AMI. And it's going to switch its repository to use the 322 AMI. So it's the same repository that's used in this newer AMI.
Excuse my ignorance there for a second, Noah, but I'm curious. You mentioned earlier on you were talking about the release cadence, like quarterly updates. Would this also work with the quarterly updates?
Yes, that's exactly right. So what we're going to see in the quarterly updates, this number here is going to increment here. You see a zero right there. It's going to be it'll increment to a 1 and things along those lines. But it's going to work the same way. And the power that this really gives you is the flexibility to decide when it is that you pull in changes to the operating system. So what we wanted to avoid is a situation where, you're running your infrastructure, you've got an auto scaling group or something like that that's launching instances, and maybe your instances are running some yum or DNF commands when they start up as part of their initialization process, and they're pulling in some packages that they need. And one day, because we pushed some package that introduced some unexpected interaction with your application or something, suddenly everything blew up and you had no idea why. And you've had to go in and troubleshoot something when you literally changed nothing about how your system operates, and suddenly things are changing, and it's really difficult to troubleshoot that. It's not a great experience at all.
Yeah, I'm glad that's been kind of taken care of. But I've been on the other side of the fence, right, where I've been presenting, and literally the night before I go on stage to present, there's been a bunch of system updates, and then nothing works.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And so what we want to do is, when you launch one of these AMIs, so if you launch this 315 AMI, all software that it installs is going to come from the corresponding 315 version repository. So anytime, unless you do something that, if we go back over here, unless you do something that actually switches the release ver to something newer, which is a thing that you have to explicitly do, that's an opt-in thing, you're going to be pulling from the same software repositories. So
you can lock the repository that way to make sure that your deployment is safe.
That's right. That's exactly right. And then you can test the updates when you're ready to pull them in, and you can go through a pipeline, you can go through a staging environment and things along those lines, and validate that your application works okay with them, and then roll that out to your production environment.
Got it. That's neat.
And so the other thing I wanted to show was, going back to SELinux, how we had talked about it. So this bit that I've highlighted up here, this little bit of cloud config, which can be passed as user data when you launch the instance. And this SELinux module lets us set the mode to enforcing. And if we then pass that as user data when we are launching this instance, let's take a look at what that actually does. We'll log in here, and we'll check SE status, and we see that it has switched itself to enforcing mode, whereas the other one that didn't have that was running in permissive mode. So it's really super easy to switch the instance to enforcing mode. It's going to run in enforcing mode sort of permanently, because it's updated the config file, which will persist. So if anytime this instance reboots, it's still going to come up in enforcing mode. And so it's super easy to enable this additional really powerful layer of security. And that's something that a lot of people are really excited about doing. If you looked at some of our really early sort of public announcements about AL 2023, we actually wanted to have that by default, but we listened to some feedback, and people were a little bit not everybody was quite ready to do that by default yet, and so we still we compromised and just made it really easy to opt in.
I'd imagine you need some testing before you turn that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right. We had a question come in on chat. Are the commands the same in SELinux as like CentOS and Red Hat?
They're very, very similar. Yeah, we share a lineage with CentOS and Red Hat. We are we're closely related to Fedora. So the DNF command, this SE status command that I showed, this is all stuff this is standard across all of the sort of Red Hat family of distributions. So that sort of stuff is quite common. And there are some other things like this release ver thing that we do when installing the updates here. That's unique to AL 2023. We've got some other things. There's the ability to query for some support lifetimes of things. We mentioned that. That AL 2023 has a 5-year support lifetime, meaning it was released in March of 2023, so it will go end of life in March of 2028. But there are other software packages that have an independent support lifetime. PHP is an example of those, and you can actually query that on your instance. So if we ask, ask support info about the support lifetime of PHP 8.1, we'll find that it's got a distinct support lifetime from the distribution as a whole. We track the PHP project's support lifetime for this particular version of PHP. At some point in the future, we're going to introduce a newer version that will be available alongside the PHP 8.1 version in the repositories, and that'll let you go ahead and start migrating your application to the newer version of PHP while you still have the older version available. So you can do things like run your production environment on PHP 8.1 while your development environment is installing PHP 8.2 and doing the porting work. And then when you're ready to roll out your application on 8.2 in production, you'll have it available. And so having this support period available as something that you can query directly is really part of our emphasis on predictability here. Where you can, there's not going to be any surprises here. Where we really want to keep things visible to you. We want you to be able to answer your own questions about what's happening. You can incorporate this into your development plans well in advance.
And speaking of development plans and like overall plans and everything that people might be able to do, there's a question in the chat. Steve, do you mind if I bring it up?
No, not at all. Okay. I was going to say, I love the predictability.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The question from the chat is, on-prem still supported? So essentially, can I use AL 2023 outside of AWS?
Yeah, we definitely. So it's not currently. So we absolutely do plan on publishing on-prem VM images. We do, of course, have container images, and those are available for use on-prem and in AWS as well. But for the VM images, like we published with AL2, we don't have them yet, but they absolutely are coming.
Cool.
Yeah, this is great. I'm going to go and launch an instance this afternoon and check it out.
Excellent. Good.
With your .NET development?
With my .NET development,
we'd love feedback on it. That'd be great.
Oh, happy to provide.
All right. Awesome. Well, Noah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for presenting for everyone about AL 2023 and all the new changes. And for everyone else, stay tuned.